ActionSA and the Democratic Alliance both calling for an urgent probe following reports that Iranian warships partook in naval exercises in Simon's Town. This is against President Cyril Ramaphosa's orders that the country be excluded. The Defense Minister Angie Motshekga has established a board of inquiry to investigate Iran's involvement. Let's get more reaction now, and we speak to ActionSA Parliamentary leader Athol Trollip, who has been waiting for us. Thank you, sir, for your patience. Let's start with the establishment of a board of inquiry. Is that a positive step to taking a disciplinary action for what appears, at least on the face of it, as a defiance to an order from the Commander-in-Chief, and that's the President?
Good evening, Polly. We as ActionSA have taken a position that a board of inquiry is not adequate. And I'll tell you why not. We need to consider what's been happening in our South African National Defence Force for the past year, and certainly in the last month or two. We've seen our dismal performance in peacekeeping endeavors in the Central African Republic, in the DRC, and it really, the chain of command there has been implicated in some really questionable activities. And then we've seen a senior Defence Force general making political statements that affect our geopolitical standing in the world, in Iran. And, you know, the Minister of Defense says that she received an instruction from the Commander-in-Chief of our Defense Force, the President, to inform her and her department that Iran should not participate in these exercises. And Iran continued to do so. Now, this, we believe, is a constitutional impasse because the President is the Commander-in-Chief of the South African National Defence Force. But the President himself is responsible for this impasse because he should have been taking steps against these generals that have been making these political utterances in Iran and also at Defence Force dinners. We've seen more and more generals from the Navy, the Army, and also the Medical Corps making political statements, and they obviously don't respect their minister, and therefore they just do as they please. Now, we believe that Parliament needs to get involved. You can't have the Defence Force invigilating itself when it is ignoring instructions from the Commander-in-Chief. And that's why we've called for the Joint Standing Committee on Defence to convene, and to convene immediately to consider what transpired with these naval drills in Simon's Town.
Mr. Trollip, if I didn't understand you better, let me try and have you crystallize this. You are suggesting that the President, the Commander-in-Chief, is possibly reaping the fruits of what he has sowed because he should have taken stringent action against General Ruzane Mapwanya, who made political statements last year in Iran. And what is happening this time possibly is a recurrence of that broken command in the chain of communication within the Defence Force. Is that what you're saying?
Polly, you understand me perfectly well, and that's why I say this is a constitutional impasse, and it is something of the President's own making. We know that we have a President who is conflict averse. We know that he does not hold his own cabinet to account. We know that as the Commander-in-Chief, he should have held these Defence Force generals to account. And if you read the Sunday newspapers, you will read that there is division, even in the senior leadership of the South African National Defence Force, and that top generals do not attend joint meetings. So there's very clearly unhappiness in our South African National Defence Force, and there's very clearly a lack of discipline and adherence to instructions and command from the Commander-in-Chief. Now, the Commander-in-Chief must take responsibility for that. Also, the generals should be held to account, obviously, but the Commander-in-Chief is the man responsible. And if they are cocking a snook at instructions issued by the Commander-in-Chief, then he himself must look at himself and wonder why these generals are doing as they please when he is, in fact, the Commander-in-Chief.
So we mentioned at the beginning General Ruzane Mapwanya, that's the head of the Defense Force. The Vice Admiral Monde Lobese, he's in charge of the Navy, and that's the man who would have been at the forefront here. But we're going to come to who was conducting or at least issuing the invitations here, Mr. Trollip. But I want to start with Vice Admiral Monde Lobese. This is a man who's been in the news in the recent past as making statements about how weak the South African Navy has become and how government is contributing to this because they are withholding funds from funding the Navy. This is understood to be the person who may have been defying the orders of the president. One cabinet minister in the Sunday Times, as you make reference to the weekend newspapers, is quoted as saying, although they don't name the minister, they simply say, that minister says Lobese wants to cause a crisis for the country. The question here is, has he gone rogue? That's the question I'm putting to you.
I think Lobese and the general who spoke in Iran last year and the general responsible for the medical corps, all three of them have been making very unambiguous political statements, which is unusual in the Defense Force scenario. And they should be exercising more discipline in that regard. But the fact of the matter is that I don't know, and I can't safely say whether this general or that general have gone rogue. But what I can safely say is that I believe that the South African National Defence Force is on autopilot and that they don't respect the Minister of Defence. And they clearly now also do not respect the chain of command and commands issued by the Commander-in-Chief, who is the President of the country. Now, that is an enormous concern for ActionSA and should be for the rest of the country. The last thing we need is for a National Defence Force to go rogue. We've seen that coups have become the order of the day in the African continent, and we can't afford to have that happen in South Africa. We've got enough of our own problems. We've got major geopolitical consequences related to this infraction that are going to cost us dearly. The last thing we need is a defense force that goes off and does its own thing and possibly even involve themselves in a coup d'etat. So the consequences of poor management, poor leadership, and poor direction have now manifest themselves in this very unfortunate constitutional impasse.
Finally, Athol Trollip, the presidency has been responding here, making it clear that it's important for South Africans to understand that all that South Africa was in this round of naval exercises was that it simply allowed for its waters to be used. Essentially, they were the hosts. The party that was doing the invitations was China, and therefore they would have invited Russia and indeed Iran to participate. Now, do we know for certain whether Iran participated in the naval exercises, or could they have obliged to the instruction from President Ramaphosa to be mere observers, given what is happening in their country, Iran? There is a huge upheaval in Iran, and the regime there is reported to have been butchering its own people. I suspect South Africa may not want to be associated with that.
Yeah, Polly, look, first of all, Iran is in trouble right now internationally because of what they're doing to their own people. But Iran is a geopolitical problem and has been for a very, very long time, and so is our international relationship with Iran. It is a big problem. But I think what you said to me about the spokesperson saying that, South Africa was just the host and our waters were being used, and you're questioning whether Iran took place in these exercises or not. Now, I think that's just completely double speak. We have a Minister of Defense that says she's going to institute a board of inquiry. Now, if she thought that there was no infraction and that they did not participate and that they were simply observers, there would be no need for a board of inquiry. We now know that she has said that there will be a board of inquiry because the National Defence Force leadership chose to ignore the instruction from the president. So I don't think there's any doubt about whether they participated or not. And I don't care who invited who. We were involved in a military exercise with China, Russia, and Iran, and the president instructed the South African National Defence Force leadership through the minister that Iran should not participate because of the consequences if they did participate. Now we are dealing with the consequences of people ignoring that command. And I think there is no doubt about that. And that is why we are calling for the Joint Standing Committee on Defence to meet and to do an oversight over the executive and over the South African National Defence Force's response or lack of response to a command that was issued by the Commander-in-Chief.
Athol Trollip, crystal clear indeed. Thank you very much for your time. ActionSA's parliamentary leader there.